My name is Jordan Burnham, and today I will be introducing you to the game Boxzee. Boxzee is a multiplayer card game that incorporates performing mathematical operations with variations of number types. It has some elements of the well-known game Yahtzee, as well as number boxes. Boxzee is a great game to play in class to help practice the basic operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It is also a game that can be altered to focus on different number types and operations depending on the content that needs to be practiced. Today I will be presenting variations including addition, subtraction, and multiplication of 1 and 2-digit integers, as well as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of fractions. The mathematical objective of this game is to create the largest total from each number box set each round so that you score the most total points. In order to play this game, you will need a deck of cards for every 2 players. In that deck, remove the kings and tens cards. For this game, aces have a value of 1, jacks have a value of 0 or 10 depending on what variation you are playing, and queens act as a wild card. You also may either choose to print the number box set for the variation you choose to play, or have a scrap piece of paper and writing utensil handy to draw these out on your own. The page variations of the number box sets are listed here. In Boxzee, queens act as a wild card. Players are able to play this card at the beginning of any round. When playing this card, the player is able to choose any card they would like to out of the discard pile, which will have cards face up. If there are not any cards in the discard pile at any point in the game that a player would like to play their queen, they will take the card from the top of the draw pile instead. Next, we will go over the steps and rules of the game. Please feel free to pause here and read each step at any time. To start the game, players are each dealt 4 or 5 cards. The oldest player is the dealer. This marks the start of a round. From here, players have the choice to chance any of the cards in their hand. For example, if a player does not like 3 of the 4 cards in their hand, they may chance them by placing them face up in the discard pile and drawing 3 new cards. If a player is happy with their cards and chooses not to chance any, they will move on to the next step. This is also the time for players to use their queen card if they choose to do so. After choosing to chance or not to chance the cards in your hand, players will then choose 3 or 4 of their 4 or 5 card values to substitute into any of the top 4 number box sets. At this time, players must use all of these cards to substitute into the same number box set. They are not able to place the cards' values into different box sets. It is important to remind you here that your goal is to create the largest number sum or total from each box set. After choosing the card values and substituting them into their corresponding boxes, players will perform the operations for that row and find their total value. Once all players have filled out their selected row, they take turns going around the circle explaining what row they chose, the card values they substituted in, and the final value they got for that row. Once everyone states what they did, this marks the end of a round. Players then draw 3 or 4 more cards to replace the ones previously played, and the process is then repeated for 3 more rounds until all 4 of the top number box sets are completely filled in. After the first 4 rounds are complete, players draw their final 3 or 4 cards. At this point, they have one last opportunity to chance their cards in their hand. From here, they use all of the cards in their hand to substitute into the final number box. Players perform the operations and find their total value. Once all 5 rounds are completed, the players then compare the values they got for each number box set. Players are awarded 1 point for each of the rows that they have the largest total value for from the first 4 number box sets. The player with the largest value for the final round is awarded 2 points. A player wins by earning the most points. If there is a tie, the players that are tied will repeat the process and play the final round again. The player that has the largest value of the tiebreaker round wins. Next, we will look at 2 players playing the addition-subtraction version of this game. The oldest player deals 4 cards to each player. In this version, jacks have a value of 0. In the first round, we see both players choose not to chance their cards. They also both choose to substitute their values into the first set of number boxes. The player on the left gets a total value of 20 for that row, and the player on the right gets a total value of 18 for that row. They then discard the cards they used and draw 3 new cards to replace in their hand. We see that the player on the right chooses to play their 2 wild cards. In this case, they choose to pick up 2 8s for their hand. The player on the left chooses to substitute values in for the second set of number boxes. They perform the operations and have a total of 7 for this set. The player on the right instead chooses to substitute their cards into the third number box set. They perform the operations and are left with a total of 92 for this number box set. The players again then discard their cards they used and draw 3 new ones. We see the player on the left choose to substitute their cards into the third number box row. They perform the operations and get a total value of 98 for this row. The player on the right chooses to chance 2 of their cards. They discard them face up and then draw 2 new cards to replace them in their hand. The player then decides to substitute these values into the fourth number box set. They get a total value of 83 for this row. The players repeat the process, and the player on the left then substitutes their values into the final row, which is the fourth number box set. They get a total value of 98 for this row. The player on the right plays their wild card and picks up a jack for their hand. They also choose to chance 1 card and draw a new card to replace it. They then substitute their values into their final row, which is the second number box set. They get a total of 4 for this row. The players then discard their cards they used and move on to the final round. The player on the left chooses to chance their 3 and draw a new card to replace it. The player on the right plays their wild card and picks up a jack for their hand. They both substitute their values in, and the player on the left gets a value of 9. The player on the right gets a total of 11. The players then compare each of the totals they got, starting with the first number box row, moving down to the last number box row. The player on the left had a larger value for all 4 of the top number box rows, earning them a total of 4 points. The player on the right had a larger value for the final number box row, earning 2 points, so the player on the left wins. Next, we'll look at some things to notice about the game. Some players may tend to wait to play their cards for a round intentionally. This is a strategy to use to be able to see what value another player may get for a specific row. As there are no rules against this, players may use this strategy often to make decisions about where they were more likely to earn points. Similarly, some players may choose to get rid of cards from their hand for a specific number box set that they know another player will have a good chance of winning. Finally, it is important to notice that even if players may have less points going into the final round, they still have a chance to catch up and win by having the largest value for this number box set. Let's take a little closer look at the number box set for the multiplication variation of Boxzee. We see this on the right. This version of the game is also played with 4 cards in your hand, and jacks have a value of 0. The process for this variation of the game is the same as the video example we just saw. Now we'll look at the fraction variation of the game. For this version, players have 5 cards in their hand, and jacks have a value of 10. It is very important, especially for this variation, to notice the final number box row. Players should be very intentional in deciding on where they choose to substitute their card values in for this, as it changes the total value. I personally really enjoy this version of the game, as it allows players to make conclusions on where they should place large values versus small values in each number box row. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have fun playing Boxzee.